Hey, how's it going? This is Seth, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to pull a list from this software service called PropStream. I'm going to go ahead and log in here. I'll just get right into it. If you followed me for any length of time, you probably know I've used other software services like this in the past. So there's lots of different services like this out there, but something that makes PropStream unique is that it pulls from multiple sources of data. So unlike something like RealQuest or DataTree, for example, which just uses one massive database, PropStream has access to a bunch of databases, including the MLS and local municipal records and a lot of other things. So that's one unique feature of it, but probably the more unique feature is that when people pull lists from PropStream, it's not so much about pulling a list, but it's about identifying a situation. And PropStream has some pre-built filters that can help you do that a little bit more effectively. Depending on what type of real estate investor you are and who you're going after and how you're going to contact them, PropStream could have some resources that will make this a lot easier for you. PropStream also has the ability to skip trace properties very quickly and easily. It's just built into the software, which is actually kind of a huge deal. There's other bulk skip tracing services like this out there, but it's like a whole separate software from where you get your lists. So you have to like pay for two separate things, whereas PropStream just has it all built into one place. And you can also send out direct mail campaigns, email campaigns with PropStream as well. We're going to touch on that just a little bit, but first I'm going to show you how to get started pulling this list. So let's go back here to the search function. So in most cases, when people are using a service like this, they're usually doing it on a county by county basis. So one way to get started would be to put in the county name and state in here, or we could also put in like a city name and state, or we could do zip codes. In this example, I'm going to start with a county. So I'm going to put in Sonoma County, California. Again, this is just an example. You could pick any county you want, but I'm going to do this one here just to show you how it works. And right up here, you'll see these little boxes. Like this one says 166 MLS, 122 pre-foreclosures, 32 auctions, and so on. And what this is doing is it's using some of PropStream's pre-built filters, and it's just telling you right off the bat, look, there's this many properties of this kind here, just so you know. So if we wanted to explore that further, we could like click on these things and start working with those. However, what I'm going to do is go right up here to where it says filter and show you how this list filtering process works. So when you look at these options over here on the left, we see owner occupied and occupancy status. So first off, one thing that confused me a little bit the first time I started using this is that when it talks about occupancy status, what it's talking about here is actually a determination from the US Postal Service about whether or not a person is receiving and responding to their mail. So in some cases, it could mean that that property is literally empty, but not always. It could also mean that a person just isn't answering their mail there. And then owner occupied, this means pretty much what you would think in terms of, is this an owner-occupied property or an absentee-owned property? However, there is a little difference when it comes to vacant land, which we'll talk about in just a minute. If we click on property characteristics, so if you're at all familiar with DataTree or ListSource or RealQuest or any of those other data services, this should look pretty familiar. This is where you can just select what type of property you're looking for, the property types within those categories, and you can specify how many bedrooms and bathrooms and the building's square footage and the lot size and that kind of thing. So no real surprises here. For MLS status, so this is something that is a little bit different because PropStream does pull a lot of data from many different MLS databases throughout the country. So if you did want to pull a list only of properties that are on the market or are not on the market, you can specify that here. And then pre-foreclosure and bank-owned properties, you can control a lot of those inputs here. Then ownership info, so you can say how long the property has been owned, what the owner type is, whether it's an individual, corporation, trust, that kind of thing. Last date of sale, so you could target people who have owned their property for a certain length of time. You can specify the last sale price. You can specify the tax exemption status. Say if you only wanted to reach out to tax exempt properties for some reason, you could do that too. And then absentee owner location. This has always been a very effective thing if you only want to contact people who live a long ways away from the property, whether that's out of state and or out of county or just the local people. And you can also filter based on the number of properties owned. So say if you wanted to target portfolio owners who own at least 2 or more properties or 5 or more or 10 or more or whatever. I know sometimes you'll come across a motivated seller because they're replying about a single property you contacted them about. But guess what? They also own 20 others that they also want to sell. This is one way that you could narrow down your list and only contact people that own a lot of properties like that. And then lien, bankruptcy, or divorce status. So you could also specify people who happen to be in one of those situations, which can cause some financial distress and reason for motivation to sell. And then valuation, equity information, and then mortgage info. So those are all the inputs you can select. And just right there, there is basically an infinite number of different ways that you can filter your lists. And if you know exactly who you're trying to target and what situation those people are in, you can get really creative in who you reach out to and try to put together a deal with. Now, like I mentioned, one thing that makes PropStream unique are these quick list choices. And these are basically like pre-made filters that will help you target certain situations. And if you know how to do this stuff in these filtering options, you could do it there as well, but this will just get you there a lot faster. And these are a lot of the most common things that people are searching for anyway. So for example, if we wanted to target high equity property owners, why would we want to do that? Well, this is a really common way that people like to sort their lists when they're trying to find properties to buy, because people who have a lot of equity in their property have the option of selling at a much lower price if they want to, because they don't have to pay off a huge mortgage balance when they sell it. And when you select this option, PropStream is going to filter your list by people who have at least 50% or more equity in their house. So that's one way to do it. And another one you could do here would be flippers. So flippers are any property owners who have owned their property for less than 2 years and they've relisted that property. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a house flipper, but just given that situation, there's a good chance they probably are, or that's what they're trying to do. Another option would be cash buyers. So kind of along the same lines as high equity owners. These are people who basically have 100% equity because they didn't get a loan when they bought the house. So they have even more flexibility to sell that thing at a low price if they want to and if they're motivated. And for all of us vacant land investors, there is a vacant land category as well. Now, you might be looking at some of these things, like for example, senior owners, and you're like, what does that mean? Is that like how old they are, or is that how long they've owned it, or is that some other criteria? And that was actually one of my first questions. And luckily, PropStream does have a pretty helpful overview here that does explain what all of these things mean. So you can go in here and understand, okay, so when I click this one, who are the people that it is keeping on or off my list? Like for example, when we see liens here, we might be like, liens? Like what kind of lien? Like a mortgage lien or some other kind of lien? What does that mean? And this explains pretty clearly. It just identifies properties with an involuntary lien recorded against their property. So like a mortgage, for example, would not be an involuntary lien because they signed the thing and agreed to it. An involuntary lien is something that gets slapped on their property, whether they want to or not, because of something that they basically haven't done, like a tax lien for not paying their taxes, an HOA lien, mechanics lien, that kind of thing. So I'm not going to go through them all right here in this video, but as you can see, if you have any questions about this, you can go and check out this overview. And I will include a link to this page beneath this video if you want to go check it out and you want to use these things. But one of the cool things about PropStream is that, like I mentioned, you can get really creative about who you're trying to target. And this will vary a lot depending on what market you're in, because not every type of list is going to work the same in every market. So you really have to understand what market you're working in and specifically who you're trying to target and why. And once you understand that, you can sort of get creative and think of various situations that would apply to those people you're trying to target. And I'm going to give you just a few quick examples here, not saying that you need to use this or should use this, but just trying to get the creative juices flowing in your own brain. For example, if I am a real estate agent and I'm trying to find people that I can help sell their property and or help them buy a new property, one way to go about finding people like that might be to filter your list like this. Go to property characteristics, and we're going to look for just single family houses under the residential category. And then we want properties with 3 or more bedrooms and 1 or more bathrooms. And we want properties that are not currently on the market. And we want these people to have owned the property for at least 10 years. And the owner type should be an individual, not a company or corporation or trust or anything like that. And then the equity amount should be at least 35% or higher. So what's the rationale behind this kind of list? Well, we just think about people who live in single family homes and have been there for 10 years or more and have a little bit of equity built up and only 3 bedrooms or 1 bathroom. Say we could even go and downsize this to like 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Well, I just think about myself back when I bought my first house in my 20s and a lot of other people I know who bought houses like this that were fine for them and maybe their spouse and maybe 1 child at the most. But as their family grows, guess what? They need to upsize and upgrade and get something a little bit bigger. And if you're targeting a list that fits this kind of criteria, there's just a higher likelihood you're going to find people who are just about ready to sell their house and move out and move somewhere new. And as a real estate agent, you could help them not only sell their existing house, but also buy a new house. So that's just one example. Another one we could do do, say if we were a real estate investor and we were looking to buy some properties, we could go to these quick list choices and select senior owners, which by the way means one of these three things. We don't necessarily know which one in every case, but they've either owned the property for more than 25 years, or the property owner has a senior tax exemption, or the current owner has an open reverse mortgage. And usually those kinds of things are fairly indicative that the owner is a senior. So we've got that selected. And then we can go over here to property characteristics and say we want only properties that are 2 or more stories. So just those two things right there. Think about why this might make sense. Picture somebody who is maybe in their 60s, maybe even their 70s. Maybe they don't really like going up and down stairs all the time and they'd rather just have a single story house. Well, this would highlight people who are probably in that phase of life and they have a house with 2 stories that they don't want anymore. So obviously this is a very rudimentary example. This doesn't necessarily mean that the sellers are going to be motivated or that they're going to sell for a super low price, but you kind of get the idea in terms of how you can zero in on situations. I would probably go a bit further and try to find people that have higher equity and that kind of thing. And I might even go over here to ownership info and say, hey, we only want the people who own more than one property. So they've got 2 or more houses they could go to because, well, if somebody already has another house, it wouldn't be so difficult to sell one of those 2 houses because they have somewhere else to go. And is this kind of list going to work for you? Honestly, I'm not really sure. It could work great in some markets and maybe not that great in other markets. But again, I'm just trying to help you understand, if you understand all the different levers that you're allowed to pull in this kind of system, and if you can use your own creative freedom to figure out, okay, who might want to sell their property, preferably at a very low price? Who could I contact? There's a whole lot you can do with these kind of filtering options. And just from my land investors out there, I'm going to show you an example of how we could filter that kind of list. I'm going to go ahead and just reset this thing all together. We go down here and click vacant land. And property characteristics, a lot of this is pretty much already set. Normally we would have to come down here and select vacant land and then go over here and get more specific about what types of vacant land. But since we've already set vacant land up here, pretty much all set, unless we want to get really specific about not including commercial land, for example. In that case, we might just want to go up here and select vacant land this way. And when we start filtering it this way, where we've selected vacant land over here under property classification, under here, by default, it's going to assume that all these are checked, even though they're not checked. By nature of the fact that you selected this and then didn't make any other changes here, the system's going to assume that you want all the vacant land until you go in here and you start checking specific ones. So for example, once I check this, it's going to think that I'm trying to go after only the recreational vacant land and no other type of vacant land. So as soon as you start checking any of these things, just be aware you have to really get specific about which type of vacant land you're going to go after. So I could go ahead and select this and this one here, and maybe this one here as well. And that seems like a pretty good list. And that gives us lots to choose from right there. And then right up here, I almost forget where it says owner occupied and occupancy status. So we're going to leave both of those as any. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, PropStream defines occupancy status a little bit different than some other data services do. It's more based on whether the property owner is receiving and responding to mail at their mailing address, not at the vacant land location. So it gets a little bit less intuitive when you're searching specifically for vacant land properties, but it's just important to understand what that means up here. So I'm just going to leave these both as any. And then down here, in terms of lot size, I know a lot of times this is a common filtering metric that land investors will use, and PropStream defaults to sorting this by square footage, not acres. So say if you're trying to target properties between 1 and 5 acres, you'd have to do some math to figure out, okay, how many square feet are in an acre, multiply that by 1 and then by 5 and sort of put that in the range here. So those two things are just a couple examples of how PropStream wasn't necessarily built with land investors first and foremost in mind. It was more built for like house investors and that kind of thing, but you can certainly still use it. You just have to understand how to interpret what these filtering things are telling you. And then down here under ownership info, owner types. So if we don't want to send mail to corporations or trusts or anything like that, we can specify that here. And just one quick note on this, the only reason that I would ever check individual and exclude all the other ones is if I know that I'm going to try and self-close these land deals without a title company. The reason being, as soon as you start trying to purchase real estate from an LLC or a trust or anything other than just a person, the closing process starts to get a lot more complicated because you have to like verify the ownership of the LLC or the corporation, or you have to verify who the different players are in the trust and who has the authority to sign it and all that stuff. And that's something that if you're closing with a title title company, that's no problem for them to do. They do that stuff all day long. So if you're going after bigger deals where it's really easy to justify closing with a title company, in my opinion, there's not a very big reason to exclude trusts or corporate entities or anything like that. But if you know you're going after ultra cheap properties and you're planning to close those by yourself without a title company, and you're going to have to verify all that ownership stuff on your own, in those cases, you might want to only reach out to the individual owners because those are going to be a lot easier to close on your own. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And then absentee owner location. So I could select these two. That would be kind of a common way that I could do that. And actually, let me go back here and do this lot size filtering thing. So just for this example, we're going to sort these properties by 1 to 5 acres. And when we translate that to square feet, that's what those numbers would look like. And one thing you'll probably notice from time to time when you're filtering lists like this, when you're looking for vacant land, is that sometimes you'll find properties over here that have houses on them. A lot of times it's like new construction, like houses that were just built and the county has not updated the type of property from vacant land to single family home yet. So sometimes you'll find that kind of thing. And if you go over here and select this vacant land option, it will get rid of those. And it's effectively doing that by only allowing vacant lots with no structures on them. So there we go. That's how we can filter lists in PropStream. And once you have a list that you're pretty confident in, first of all, you can see all the properties right over here in the right sidebar here. You can click on any of them and see all the information. You can find the mailing address. You can find all this stuff without even downloading the list. So it's kind of nice. But once we're confident in our list filtering criteria, we can click Save Search right here. And an interesting thing about PropStream is that it can like continually monitor this list. So this isn't just a one and done thing. You can set it up so that PropStream will email you whenever new properties come on this list. So it's not just like a single snapshot in time. You can sort of stay up to speed on how this list might be changing as time goes on. So I'm not going to do that here, but just keep in mind that's something you can do, whatever types of properties you're going after. And once we want to finalize our list, we're going to select this, which is going to select them all. And we could go down here and remove certain ones if we wanted to. I'm just going to select everything for this example and then click Add to List. And we're going to create a new list name. Go ahead and save this. And something else you can see here is that if you click this little arrow and pop it out, you can see when this data was last updated. So I'm recording this as of December 21, 2021, and you can see how old some of this data is. And you can see that in some cases it's like a month old, and in other cases it's several months old, sometimes even years old. But at least it shows you that and you know, and you can kind of decide based on that whether or not you actually want to use that on your list or not. So it's just a helpful thing to be aware of. Once you've got that list finalized, you can go over here and click on My Properties. It's going to bring you to a page like this, and we're going to go and click on the list we just created, and this will show you everything from that list. And what you can do is select everything and export it if you want, so you can get a spreadsheet of all that stuff. And note that it says you have 9,865 properties left to export for this billing period. And that right there is actually kind of a significant thing because a lot of other data services are going to charge you a certain amount per lead that you download, whether it's 8 cents or 9 cents or 25 cents. And when a data service is charging you like that, it can get very, very expensive. But with PropStream, you get 10,000 per month as part of the monthly fee. And that right there is a pretty big deal because that's very, very cost effective to get a whole lot of leads for a very cheap price. And it's also worth noting that you can do more than that if you want. You could do 20,000 or 30,000. I think you can do up to 100,000 at the most. So you can go beyond that if you're willing to pay a little bit more for it. But that right there is pretty awesome. You can just get a whole lot of data for that set price. But once we've downloaded the spreadsheet, it's going to look like this, which is pretty predictable. It's about how we would normally expect these things to look. I know over here where it says lot size instead of acre size, so you could just add a column and do some math to figure out the acre size. So I guess that's one little quirk about it, but that's what the lists look like. And if you want, you could take that list directly from there and then bring it over to something like Rocket Print or Click to Mail or ITI Direct Mail or whatever mail service you're using and get that campaign sent out. However, keep in mind, PropStream also allows you to send out mail from PropStream if you want to. And I haven't personally sent out a campaign through PropStream yet. But when you go ahead and click on this, it looks like you have two options. You can do 2 different sizes of postcards. And when you look at the pricing and compare it to something like Rocket Print, the pricing is pretty similar, at least for this size postcard. So assuming postcards are what you want to do, and you just want to keep everything right here in PropStream, that is another option you can consider with this kind of service. And you can edit however you want your postcard to look right here, but you can also do email marketing. And you might be be wondering, well, how am I going to get email addresses and phone numbers and all this stuff? And that's what I want to show you next. If you go over here to skip tracing, so PropStream makes it extremely easy to skip trace all of these people from PropStream. And when we say skip tracing, what this means is that it's going to go through whatever list you select, and it's going to take the property owner's first and last name and try to find any phone numbers and email addresses associated with those individuals. Now, keep in mind, if a property owner is an LLC or a trust or something like that, it's not going to work for those. This only works for individuals. But if it doesn't work for any of these, you just don't get charged. So it's basically just going to charge you for each of the leads that it's able to successfully skip trace. So I'm going to show you how we do this. We click select contacts. We go up here and we're going to select that list I just created. And we can see all those people right here. And once they're all checked, we're going to click add selected contact. And then it brings them all down here. And then we're going to click done. And then we click next. And it gives us a quick summary of how much it's going to cost us to skip trace all these people. And it says 12 contacts have been omitted because they're duplicates. So that's helpful. But assuming we're okay to proceed, we will click place order. And it gives us this little warning, say that we have to abide by the do not call registry. So that's fine. And then we click OK. And it's going to take a little bit of time to skip trace all those. And once it's done, it's going to send me an email to let me know. And then we can get back in here and see the results of what it was able to come up with. Okay, so fast forward about 5 minutes. I've been sitting here for just a little bit waiting for this email to come in, and I just got it. It looks like they were able to skip trace 117 of the 123 records that I requested to have skip traced. We can go ahead and log in to see the results, see what came back, and it's not bringing me directly there, so I'm gonna have to go over here to contacts, and we can already see some of the information that's come through so far, but I'm gonna click on this specific list that I wanted to have skip traced, and here we go. We can see all the individuals on our list. We can see their email addresses, in some cases several email addresses. We can see phone numbers, again in some cases several phone numbers, and their property address and mailing address, which was there already. But this right here alone can be super useful because there's a lot of times when mailers get kicked back to us because the address is non-deliverable for whatever reason, or sometimes we just flat out want to call the person first or send them a text or send them an email or anything like that. And this makes it super fast and convenient to get all of that information without having to spend a whole lot of time or money to get it. And again, like this cost me, what, 12 bucks to get this? That is not a bad deal considering how much good information there is here. And granted, I'm sure that some of these email addresses and phone numbers probably aren't going to work anymore. So I'm not expecting all this stuff to work perfectly, but it just equips me with a lot of data that I can use to try to contact that person in a way that doesn't involve the U.S. Postal Service. If you're ever looking for a useful skip tracing tool, especially one that can do it in bulk, PropStream is awesome for that, and it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to do it. And something else I want to show you is that you can set up an individual website for every single campaign you do. And granted, it's not like a crazy complex website, but it's enough to do the job. All I have to do is go up here and click Set Up Website, and we have to pick some kind of extension to use on the tail end of this URL that it uses by default. So you could use a number like this, which is kind of confusing, but doesn't really matter if you're going to include the link in an email because the person just clicks the link anyway. So you could just use a number like that, or you could come up with something creative that hasn't been used by another PropStream user yet. Like in this case, this is Sonoma County, so I could put, I don't know, Sonoma or something like that. And then look, the name is available. Or I could do sell Sonoma, doesn't really matter, just as long as it works. And then you can start with just a completely blank website, or you can start with a pre-made template that looks like this. And just for ease of use, I think most people will probably want to do this because it works and it gets the job done and it's pretty fast. We're going to do that. And in my case, if I'm trying to buy land, for example, I would probably want to change this to land instead of houses. Now it would probably change the wording a little bit. So if I wanted to update this image, I could just click here and then click this remove button, find an image on my computer, like this one that I got from unsplash.com. And just like that, I've got a new image back there. Very, very easy to edit these things. So we can go ahead and save this. And then we can use this link to put on our mail pieces. We could put it in our emails that we're sending out, any text messages that we might be sending out. And if we go through here and just test this thing out, just to make sure it's actually working, click contact us. It's going to bring us down to this form. Let's go ahead and put in some info here, and then we will send this thing and we will see what happens on the other end. And immediately after I sent that, I got this email from PropStream showing me the data that just came through. So it's pretty simple and easy to use. So now that we've gotten a decent overview of what PropStream can do when it comes to pulling a list, filtering that list, trying to identify situations, and even going beyond that to handle the actual marketing campaign of sending out mail or skip tracing, emailing, setting up websites, all that stuff. What's the final verdict? Do I think PropStream is a decent investment and worth the money to pay on an ongoing basis? Honestly, I think it kind of depends on what type of investor you are, or really what kind of real estate professional you are, what kinds of people you're trying to find, what properties you're trying to work with, what information you need, and what kinds of marketing you're trying to do. A lot of people handle certain aspects of marketing, like their direct mail, with a completely different service that might have more flexibility or different pricing. And that's totally fine. And in some cases, it might not even be in your best interest to try to handle every single aspect through one software. But if it does work for you, it certainly will simplify things because there's fewer things you have to pay for, fewer platforms you have to log into. And I think when you consider the fact that PropStream can give you access to the MLS in many places around the country, that's a pretty big deal. And also the mobile app is super helpful if you're somebody on the road to actually have a high quality, well-designed app that really works. That can go a really long way too. And just the ability to research individual properties. Again, I've got a separate video explaining how to do that. That's another super helpful aspect of PropStream. And I think probably the most compelling thing to me is the fact that you don't really have to pay per lead that you download. It's that one monthly price, and that gives you up to 10,000 leads per month, which is huge. But I guess the final answer is, yeah, absolutely. I think PropStream is a super valuable service. Man, I would have loved to have access to something like this way back when I was getting started, but there was really nothing like this on the market, at least not that I knew of back then. And in this age of more and more data becoming available, and more importantly, platforms like this that can actually reach out and grab all that data from different sources and put it all together in one place, this kind of thing can be extremely advantageous. So hopefully you've gotten a decent look at what's possible through PropStream. And keep in mind, I didn't even show you everything. These are just the most important things that would matter to me in my business. So I wanted to highlight those things for you. And as you can see from this page here, PropStream does have this free 7-day trial. So it doesn't cost you anything if you just want to get in here and poke around and see if it might work for you. And if it doesn't, then just don't sign up. It's that simple. So REtipster does have an affiliate link for PropStream. And if you sign up through our link, you can get a teeny tiny discount on your subscription. And you can also help support the REtipster community. The link is retipster.com/PropStream. And if you do sign up through that link, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, and I hope you find PropStream helpful. And if you've seen this video and you've decided PropStream is not for you, that's totally cool too. I wish you all the best with whatever data service you decide to work with, if any. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.